My guest today is Dana Canedy, whose memoir, A Journal for Jordan, was recently made into a movie that came out on Christmas Day. Some of you may have seen it. It details the story of her relationship with Army First Sergeant Charles Monroe King and the journal that he left for their son, Jordan. Charles was killed by a roadside bomb in Iraq on October 14th, 2006. Jordan was 7 months old. Dana herself was the first Black woman to serve as a senior editor at the New York Times. She's also a winner of the Pulitzer Prize, which, for those of you who don't know, is the most prestigious award in print journalism. She then went on to become the first African American and first female administrator of the Pulitzer Prize Committee. So another big deal there. And she's now the senior vice president at the publishing company Simon and Schuster. So Dana, first of all, thank you so much for being here. It is a huge honor to get to talk to you and have you on the podcast
thank you for
today.
having me. I really appreciate your interest.
Of course. Well, I got to watch a screener of the movie and I really enjoyed it. And so I'm curious, like, as you're watching this, when you wrote this memoir, A Journal for Jordan, did you ever imagine that your love story with Charles would become a movie? And not just any movie, a movie with big names like Denzel Washington and Michael B. Jordan behind it, no less. So I'm curious how that all came about and what it's like to watch it play out on the big screen.
I, of course, could not have imagined any of this. I just was hoping that I would be able to tell a story that resonated with people about military service and sacrifice, and about our own loss, to reinforce the idea with Americans that soldiers and their families, serve every day in ways that civilians don't have to think about, in terms of safety and commitment to our country. And so I was just really honored to share the story. And, all these years later, well, Denzel and I have been friends for about 13 years.
Okay.
And he says a lot, and I'm just humbled by this, that this is the most important thing he's ever done in his entire career. And that's a blessing.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, I would love to hear about the real Charles. What was he like? And for people that haven't seen the movie, can you share more about how you guys met and fell in love? And
Sure.
Maybe some of that in the movie was fictionalized anyway. I don't know, but
yes, much of it wasn't. I was pleasantly surprised at how accurate it is. But Charles and I dated for 8.5 years, and he went off to the war, and as you say, was killed in action, and I needed something to do with my grief. So I wrote about it first on the front page of the New York Times to give Americans an idea of what that's like when you get that knock at the door and you open it up and there are the military officials there and you know exactly what that means. And then one of my colleagues said, our readers will demand a book. And that's what happened. And then fast forward, it became a movie. But he wrote a 200-page journal to our son from Iraq, telling him everything from the power of prayer to how to choose a wife, to just really how to live an honorable life. And he put a letter in the end of it that said, this is everything I could think of to teach you to be a man if I don't make it home. Mm-hmm. And he had 1 month to go when he was killed. Mm-hmm. So that's the story. And to see it playing out like this, I don't think about it as on the big screen, although I know what that means, but I'm just honored to be able to share the story, which I hope is not just sad, but also is about resilience, mm-hmm. To allow people to see through my example that you can get to the other side of tragedy, mm-hmm. and get back to a place of happiness and joy. It takes a long time to do it, though.
Yeah. Had he really worked for your dad, like they show in the movie? Was your dad really his drill sergeant?
He wasn't his drill sergeant, but they were friends. He was friends with both of my parents. And I met him in my parents' living room, and he was a soldier. And I'd said, I always thought I didn't want to marry a soldier because I grew up in a military family. And I thought, and this has changed a lot, obviously, that women in the military marriages, really didn't have much of an identity, because if the soldier got restationed, you had to quit your job, give up your life and move. Now that's changed a lot. Women have a lot more opportunities, and there are also a lot more women who serve. But at the time, in the late 70s, early 80s, when I grew up, all I knew is I didn't want that. I wanted to have my own career and my own independence. And it was through Charles that I realized you really could have both, and that I began to honor and respect, even at a deeper level, our men and women in uniform, and to realize the whole family serves, not just the soldier.
Yeah, that's actually something I was going to ask you about because there is a scene in the movie where, the actress who plays you is talking about, well, I don't want to give up my career to follow you around. You were at the New York Times, which is a big deal. Obviously, other journalists out there listening know that. And you know, it's something that we talk a lot about on this podcast, the struggles that military spouses have to go through to find and maintain careers. And yes, it's definitely getting better, but there's still so much of a concern out there. It's
Mhm.
been addressed even by Dr. Jill Biden, our first lady. So
Mhm.
I'm curious, is that a conversation that you and Charles actually had in real life? And was that a real concern that you had about, marrying an army guy?
A
What was your
hundred
plan?
percent. Yeah, 100%. That was the conversation we had. We had it more than once.
Mm,
And up until right before he went to Iraq, I wasn't actually sure that I wanted to be married. Not because I didn't love him; I loved him deeply, but I was worried about this. I wanted my career, but I also realized I wanted him, and I was about to turn 40. I didn't even know if we could have a child. Thank God we were able to. So we had this conversation a lot, and what we decided was, and it worked for us, it might not with other families, is we commuted a lot.
mm,
There was, I was in New York, but then at one point I was promoted to be a national correspondent and bureau chief, responsible for the New York Times' coverage in Florida. So I spent 2.5 years in Florida, and he would
mm.
just come whenever he could to visit and be with me. But we decided that our relationship was strong enough that we were not going to let the logistics of two high power careers that took us to different cities come between us. And we committed to that, and it was never an issue.
Okay.
And one of the reasons it wasn't is because I had a man who really respected women. He
Yeah.
writes about that a lot in the journal, that he really respected women. And so he was going to do whatever he could to support me. And I did the same for him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just talked about, so you guys weren't married when he died,
No.
and the film gets into that a little bit. And
Mhm.
so you may not have gotten the same supports that, official military
Right.
widows would have gotten.
Right.
I'm curious, like, did you find support among Gold Star groups or, other military related supports after he
So this
died?
is this is a very interesting question. I had a very big career. So in terms of support, I was fine.
Mm,
Um, um, and Charles took care of everything that he could think of that we would need. So I had a power of attorney, military power of attorney. He took care of his life insurance and benefits and all of that. And our son had full military benefits. What I didn't get initially, and the military has been really terrific to us in recent years. They allowed us to shoot scenes in Arlington Cemetery.
mm,
My son's been to the Pentagon. When Michael B was training to play the role of Charles, it was on a military base, and our son Jordan got to spend the week with them there, and the soldiers could not have been more amazing to him. They made him an honorary drill sergeant.
Oh,
So
fun.
we are truly blessed, and the military has been great. But at the beginning, when Charles died, it was horrible. It was completely the opposite. I was completely disrespected.
Mm,
Everything from the same officers who came to tell me about Charles, and they had no information, took me to a military base in Brooklyn at the time, and there was a man that I had to meet with just to go over all the details, and he basically said, you're probably not going to get everything you're entitled to because you had this baby out of wedlock. That's what he said to
mm,
me. Charles and I planned our child. And the reason that we weren't married is because we were engaged when I suddenly decided, I think I want to have a baby. And he said,
mm,
okay. And I said, okay, so when you come back from Iraq, we'll have our wedding and then we'll see if we can have a baby. And he said, no, let's not wait. I may not come back. So
mm.
that we made that decision, and we prayed over it actually. But this guy just completely disrespected me. And then he basically said, he made me feel like I was an unofficial family member of Charles. And a tear rolled down my eye, but I wasn't even crying. I just had a tear, and I was sitting there in his chair holding my baby thinking, how did we end up in this room, in this
Mm.
position? And he said, all right, you need to calm down.
What?
And I could not believe it. I
Wow.
could not believe it. This is someone obviously who should have never been in that position. And then the same, officials who were assigned to us to help us through this were supposed to pick me up and take me to the airport when we were going to bury him for his funeral. They didn't show up. So I ended up, me and my baby in a cab. They were supposed to have someone pick us up at the other end to help me. They didn't show up. I'm sitting there shaking in baggage claim. Now, I'm a journalist. I've been all over the country on my own, reporting stories, getting in on and off airplanes. But that day I was having a hard time breathing even. And I just was like, I just need to get from here to the airport. I just need to get from this airport to the next airport. I was in bad shape. I needed somebody to help us. And I'm standing there in baggage claim, after I made it through this flight thinking I'm going to collapse. And there was no one there. They just didn't show up. Even the day they were supposed to come to notify me that Charles died, they either got lost, had the wrong address or something. I waited for them until midnight because I knew they were on their way. Charles's mother had told me, and they didn't show up. They just went home, and after they couldn't find our address and came the next day. So all of that magnified my grief. To this day, I can't believe that happened. But since then, in the years that followed and after the book came out and so forth, and I'm sure all those people are gone and retired, but since then, the military really has supported us and been great.
Oh, I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Thank you.
What has the response been, from your memoir, of other grieving military families? Like, have you heard from others who have read it?
I have. In fact, I've spoken to a lot of grieving military families, and then just military families in general. People across the country came out when the book came out to hear me speak or to meet with me. And the response has been so amazing. I always say that obviously we don't speak for anybody, Jordan and I, but ourselves and our family. But I do think there are some universal things that I hope honor service members, like the big and small decisions that people in the military have to make every day, when there's a war going on. And, for every soldier who's in a war zone, there's a spouse or partner keeping the kids' homework checked and making sure the bills get paid and tuning up the car. And so people have thanked me and said, thank you for using your platform to remind people of the sacrifice that we make. And I think for some grieving families, I've heard that it's helped them realize they can get through it too. It's the most awful thing that can happen to you in your entire life. And the day he died, I collapsed on the hardwood floor screaming. I would have never dreamed that all these years later, Jordan would be so happy and that we would be in such a good place in our life and still have all this support from people across the country and many parts of the world.
I think one thing too that you draw attention to is the fact that, not every family is necessarily like married, mom, dad, baby. It's like you have military partners that are going through a lot of the same things, even if there's not, an official marriage there, and military kid, it's just, so I think that brings some, I guess, diversity or another look at it. Another representation of family. What is the real life Jordan like? How old is he? What does he do? What is he into?
He's 15.
Okay.
He's an honor student. I call him a nerd. He's obsessed with politics. He can tell you which state has how many electoral college votes. One day I saw him walking around the room with his headset on. I said, what are you listening to? He was listening to old presidential debates.
Okay.
He hadn't told anybody, not his friends, not his teachers, anyone about the movie, or that he knew Michael B. Jordan or considered, Denzel Washington his Uncle D. We went to the set the first time. He would only stay for his lunch hour. I said, you can spend the whole day here. He said, no, Mom, I don't want to miss algebra. So he's serious. He's an old soul. He's sweet. He's funny. I think his dad would be really proud of him. And I see his dad in him every day.
Oh, that's amazing. When did you share the journal with him, and how did you was it part of like telling him what happened to his dad, or like how did that all come about?
So when he was a baby, we would read bedtime stories, and occasionally I would just pull it out and start reading from it and say, your daddy wrote this to you. So he's known about it his whole life. And then for a few years, I just sort of put it away. So I was grieving the first few years of his life, but I wanted him to just have a childhood where he could run and play and, be silly. And I figured once he started asking about his dad or asking questions that I knew the answers were in the journal, I'd bring it out. And that's what I did. And so right now he has favorite journal entries, but as you can imagine, it means something to him at 15. There are entries in there that'll mean a lot more to him when he's on his wedding day or when he becomes a father. But I told him, I said, Jordan, your father found a way to be present for you and have an ongoing conversation with you in a way that many parents who are living don't have with their children. And he understands that this journal represents a deep reflection of how much his father loved him.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Well, Dana, lastly, what do you hope will come of this film? What has already come of it? And what do you want people to really take away from it? I know you're honoring Charles's memory in this, but yeah, and we maybe already touched on this, but I'm just curious, like, what do you hope will come from it?
I think people will take from the movie what they bring to it and what they need based on what's going on in their lives. And so I don't presume to know what it'll mean to people. I hope it'll be meaningful. But I think if there are universal takeaways, I hope what comes through is, the honor and the dignity with which military personnel and their families serve this country. And just as a reminder of patriotism and how we are all united in our love for this country and that we are the United States. And if we can't be united, we might as well change our name. That's one. Two, I think that it would be meaningful to me if seeing what I went through for people who are going through it now gives them hope that they can get through things that are difficult, tragedies, whether it's a death or health situations, that you can get to the other side of things. Somebody said to me in the early days when I was grieving, I felt like I was a mess. I was falling apart. And someone said to me, "Oh, you're so strong." And I was like, "Stop saying that. I don't feel strong at all." And this person said, "You don't have to feel strong to be strong." And it was through the grace of God that I got through this. And I will miss Charles for the rest of my life, for every day of my life. But we have a full life, Jordan and I do. I've dated. We laugh a lot. We take cool vacations. We have a very full life. And so life can go on. And I never thought I'd be able to say that when Charles died.
Yeah, that's such a good word. Well, thank you, Dana, so much. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with before we wrap up?
No, I just, I want to wish everybody a happy holiday and tell folks to stay safe out there. And I appreciate your time and your interest as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You as well.
Bye.